very first event of this series, we looked at reframing the challenge. We covered the following key components: ego and ecosystem thinking, the blind man and the elephant's analogy, the iceberg model, looking at the intricacies such as events, patterns of behavior, the structure of the system, and mental models. In the second event, the team focused on mapping the challenge, where Linda discussed the basic elements of systems mapping and how that related to the case study that will be discussed along with other aspects today. This was followed by Austin's section on the map walkthrough of the Makutu Tamaga Municipality Smallholder Farmer project done by Riasa. Today's event will be a discussion. We have 3 speakers who will be presenting their work around ecosystem building for agricultural innovation. The session will be facilitated by my colleague Linda, and she will introduce the speakers and their topics in detail later on. In terms of housekeeping rules, please remember to keep our mics muted as this session is being recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording with you on our YouTube channel. If you have any burning questions, please post them in the chat box or raise your hand. Myself and Sheldon will attend to them. If you have any input to provide during the discussion itself, please raise your hand, and Linda will give you the opportunity to contribute as well. I'll now be handing over to Linda, who will introduce our speakers for today's session and facilitate the rest of the discussion. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Boito, for the opening. I'm very excited to have you all here. My name is Linda Pufea, and I'm a facilitator in this hub. And I also work with Riasoko, the organization that did the research that we've been discussing in this series. So today we're going to start by, sorry, give me a moment, please. Thank you for sharing the screen. Thank you. Today, I'm going to start by introducing tonight's session. And tonight's event is the last of our 3-part series entitled Innovating Agricultural Systems for Smallholder Farmers in South Africa, where we'll be talking about innovative ideas, methods, and tools that can help build an ecosystem value model for agricultural innovation. Why the ecosystem value model? We understand that collaboration is essential to scaling inclusive innovation in agriculture. During our event today, we're going to have 3 presenters who share some insights that will deepen our understanding of aspects such as how to create an environment for farmers to increase productivity, aspects around agricultural technology, and building inclusive and integrated stakeholder networks. And before I jump to introduce the speakers, I'm just checking here the chat box. I see we have participants from Ghana, Northern Cape in South Africa, from the Kalahari Desert. Welcome, Stellenbosch, Windhoek, Namibia, and London, UK. Welcome, everybody. Okay, thank you, everybody. Let's move ahead now, and I will introduce the speakers. Our first speaker for the event is Jill Bouscarat. Jill is a research support officer at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, Sahel and West Africa Club. Before joining the OECD, she worked as an assistant project manager for the Agricultural Training Division of the European Institute of Cooperation and Development, a French NGO. Her research work focuses on food systems transformations, including regional food systems, marketing functioning, food flows, food prices, and affordability in West Africa. Based on her knowledge of the region, she will share some insights on the importance of creating an enabling environment for farmers to increase agricultural productivity and commercialization, including off-farm segments, market access, etc. Our second speaker will be Dr. Phetole Mangena. He's a senior lecturer and researcher in the Department of Biodiversity, School of Molecular and Life Sciences, Faculty of Science and Agriculture at the University of Limpopo. Dr. Mangena will share his views on the role that Agritech and biotechnology play in the transformation of how crops are cultivated, especially under environmental stress conditions. He will also share new insights on agricultural technology and how it has continued to evolve, with modernization taking center stage in environmental and human factors that put severe strain on crop growth, productivity, and yield. We will also discuss why the demand for agri-tech and biotechnology has increased more than ever before due to these myriad of challenges. Dr. Mangena is a member of the South African Global Change Science Committee. He's also a prominent scientific advisory committee member overseeing the strategic implementation of the Global Change Research Plan. He's also an approved member of the Global Forum on Food Security and Nutrition at FAO, and a member of the South African Association of Botanists. Finally, we will have Rirhandzu Marivate, who will speak about the need and opportunity to transform the agriculture sector by building inclusive and integrated stakeholder networks to support the knowledge and experience needed among young and emerging farmers, commercial farmers, and even other players in the value chain, such as food security organizations, the informal sector, and retailers. Rirhandzu is a socio-ecologist and regenerative food systems coordinator at the Sustainability Institute in Cape Town. She currently oversees the running of the SI Permaculture Learning Garden and is the project manager of the Living Soils Community Learning Farm. The project aims to establish a self-sustaining learning farm that produces food using ecologically regenerative farming methods for the benefit and development of long-term food security by incorporating the training of young and emerging farmers and the community at large. So without wasting much time, I will hand over to Jill, who's going to kick off this event with a presentation. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you, Linda. I will just try to share my screen. Okay, so I'm happy to be here today for this exciting learning series. I hope you can see my screen. So today we'll share some insight about how to create an enabling environment for smallholder farmers to grow and better integrate the markets. As already said, I'm working at the OECD, but I will mainly share my own vision and based on my current and past experience. So just a few words regarding what my past experience in the field of agriculture. So I started working in the agriculture in Peru where I was working for a microfinance association, mainly promoting financing and transfers of technical and organization skills. So mainly working at farm level. Then I moved to a French NGO working on the coordination of agricultural training centers. Again, mainly focused on agricultural skills and knowledge. And then 2 years ago, I entered the OECD to work at the SWAC, where I mainly change of paradigm. And here I'm mainly working on research project focusing on both on-farm and off-farm segments and elements, and adopting a more holistic approach, working on the whole functioning of the regional food system. So just before starting, so I guess we have to acknowledge the fact, I will mainly focus on West Africa, and I guess we have to acknowledge the fact that South Africa is quite distinct, this difference between with West African food economies, in the sense that I think that in terms of structural change, South Africa is way more advanced than a lot of West African countries. It is already a dualistic system of farm production with small-scale farmers, but also really big farm industries. We already observed the importance of supermarkets, which often go with some important quality and safety controls. So here I just put a graph I like from a research whose name is Thomas Rirhandzu, and it talks about the 3 different stages of structural changes when we talk about food system transformation. And I get that South Africa already belongs to the 3rd category, while a lot of West African countries are still part of the traditional or transitional, if we think about Ghana, Nigeria, or Senegal, such countries like that. So this being said, I list here a few barriers that are preventing smallholder farmers to develop their activities. So these are evidence based on the literature that is existing at the continental level. So, and I distinguish between what we can call on-farm elements and off-farm elements. So on the left side, we often talk about low soil fertility, low productivity, lack of finance, production technology, while on the right side, I'm focused on the limited value chain coordination, lack of infrastructure, price volatility, market access, and all those kinds of elements that can impede a producer to sell the product on the market. Here at SWAC, we recently work on a study focusing on how to inform local policy to develop employment strategy in the sectors of in the food economies, and how to enable youth and women to better integrate the market, the food economy labor markets. So we surveyed more than 700 producers, traders, and processors from 2 different regions, the Niayes region in Senegal and the Dandi region in Niger. And when we were asking about the farmers about their constraints in integrating the market and developing their activity, a lot of them were talking about access to finance. This was the main constraints. Depending on the context, in Senegal, a lot of people were talking about soil fertility and irrigation issues, but a lot of producers also refer to issues related to competition, to low selling prices, to lack of connection between the different intermediaries and connection to the market. So I think that even if you increase your production and your productivity, but if you are not able to access the market and consumption hub, you won't benefit from this. So I think that question related to market access and also related to more broadly the demand side are crucial when we talk about smallholder profitability and developments of their activities. Here I focused on the local milk value chains, which is a big topic in West Africa, I think, and it's also a quite interesting topic when you try to answer the question, which is how might we better integrate small producer to national and regional value chains. So just a few words on that. So livestock breeding is an important sector in the Sahel and West Africa. There's a lot of people working on this area, but only 20% of dairy companies in West Africa are collecting local milk, and only 1 to 7% of the milk produced locally is collected. So in Senegal, for example, as in many Sahelian countries, there is a huge market potential for dairy products. Small and medium enterprise which are working on this sector are experimenting a really fast growing growth of their activities, but this does not benefit to local farmers. So there is few issues related to that. So first, there is a strong competition with standardized and industrial products. A lot of small and medium enterprises that are working on dairy production are relying on importing milk powder, which is really competing with local milk produced. So buying local milk is much more expensive than buying imported milk powder. And this is a big problem for the improvement of the local production chain. At the same time, the milk processing and marketing infrastructure is not collecting to local production. So there is low ability to conservation, lack of transportation. So there is lack of structuring investments that are impeding local producers to connect it to local consumption sites. And there is also a big issue related to quality and safety standards, with local producers having difficulties in complying with that. And at the same time, there is a lot of evidence that a well-functioning livestock system can improve producer income, generate employment, improve living conditions, but nothing is really observed on the ground. So here I focused on a few specific initiatives, whether it is at regional level, provided by international organizations or private companies, that are trying to answer the question, which is how might we better integrate those farmers to local and regional value chain. So first, at regional level, there is the ECOWAS, which is the regional organization, which is mainly launching some projects on two main areas, which are the collection and processing and distribution of local dairy products and specific equipment, and also the improvement of milk and animal feed production. At the same time, there is some structural investments on financing, storage, and transport infrastructure, and also on financing a processing unit for local commercialization. Regarding the international organization, there is the World Food Program, with promoting and trying to launch a project working with small dairy farmers, milk producer and distributor, and school to transcend the link across the value chain. So the idea is that local milk is collected and processed in the region and then distributed in schools through school feeding program. And there is also at the same time some private companies that are trying to promote projects based on locally produced milk. So for example, we see in the photo in this picture a woman from the region with labeling his butter with and highlighting the benefits from buying locally produced products. And finally, there is also a lot of new initiatives that are trying to promote inclusive value chain. So for example, there is a local dairy innovation platform that are trying to promote inclusive collection system and sustainable production, that are also trying to promote and support local cooperative and their integration to the broader value chain. Regarding a lot of sector, there is a lot of other exciting partnership in the food sector. For example, with some initiative providing last mile coordination or making transacting with smallholder farmers more profitable. And finally, I will conclude by one last point, which I think is crucial, is that we won't be able to create an enabling ecosystem for smallholder producer without bringing farmer voice to the global conversation. And this has already been mentioned many times 2 years ago during the preparation of the Food System Summit, with a lot of people saying that we really have to ensure that poor and marginalized people are the type of the summit, and that their voice must be heard and valued. But I think that today we often do not, that farmers are not well representative in those global conversation, in policymaking instance, and that or they are misrepresenting. We always host like successful entrepreneurships that participate to the debate, who are often highly skilled, and will come to share their success stories. But there is a need for more social dialogue and institutional learning. So I think it's really important to create spaces for farmer-to-farmer engagement, and also create spaces for farmers to share and engage in policy making process. To announce abroad, and systemic understanding of issues that are facing and to better address those issues. So thanks for listening and happy to discuss in the second part of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Jill, for sharing the West African context, which does resonate very well with what we are experiencing also in South Africa. And this is based on the presentation of the systems map that we did in our previous event. We'll talk about that more later on. I'll move on now to our second speaker, Dr. Phetole Mangena. Over to you.
Thank you, Linda, and good afternoon, colleagues. Well, I don't know if you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yes, thank you. My name is Phetole. I'm based at the University of Limpopo. Well, I wanted to share with you about the agri-technology as well as the biotechnology, since the two technologies slightly differ. I'm saying slightly differ, even if they widely differ, because their purpose is basically the same. And I chose my talk simply because I've noticed the great need that as a continent, rather than a country, we actually need to move with the world. I can see that when we think of the levels of the Industrial Revolution, we're still a bit behind. And therefore, sometimes when we don't catch up, we are also going to miss up on the opportunities that comes with the benefits of these technologies, especially some user-friendly and widely available technologies that actually our smallholder farmers can actually benefit from. So within my presentation, I actually wanted to first look at the trends in terms of the agricultural value chain, basically, and also maybe look at the environmental and human impacts that actually this technology can help us deal with, and also discuss how all these trends and the impacts linked with the sustainable goal, developmental goals. And then later, then I'll deal with the smart agricultural technology as well as the biotechnology. And I think here that's where I will try and emphasize how the two can actually be integrated, and our farmers can actually also benefit from some of the low-cost technologies that are available. And of course, I wouldn't leave the traditional method behind. I'll also try and help get the traditional methods, because some of these methods are extremely beneficial, and they're way sustainable, and they can be easily used together with the new technology that we're experiencing. And of course, this is also in line with the skepticism that comes normally when you invent a new technology into agriculture, especially when I'll be talking about the biotechnology. And then some little bit of the politics and economics of it, because I know that the role of farming is not only to feed the growing nation, but also to make profit. So I'll also touch on that. And lastly, I'll look at maybe briefly some of the regulations that are available. But like as I've indicated, the population is growing at an alarming rate. If you go to the social science studies, you see that some researchers raise concerns about this. But of course, for us and for the smallholder farmers in the country and around the continent, there's a great need to actually increase crop productivity. So the age of industrialization, whether you talk about the fourth industrial or fifth industrial revolution, or you talk about agri-technology in general, then that's actually the only approach that can assist us to make sure that we actually meet the demand. But when one looks at the image on the right, you can actually see that even with the subsistence crops that we actually grow, there are still some challenges, because when you look at the efficiency in terms of agriculture, then you can see that there are some variations, and some of the bars are very small. You can actually give high yield, but of course, this comes at the back of what the environmental and the human impact that actually put pressure on these crops. And also the fact that most of the farmers regionally, they use, they prefer cultivating cash crops rather than their subsistence crops. And also we have seen that domestically in our homes, we also are no longer farming as much as we used to maybe in the old age. So this also will mean that then farmers have to use a lot of inputs into their cultivation systems. And of course, that means the use of chemicals in order to detect pests, to control diseases and other issues that can actually affect their crops. So all of these lead then to the discussion that I wanted to just bring in before we talk about the systems on the issue of the environment as well as the human impact. I mean, some of these technologies or some of these applications or methods of cultivation that usually commercial farmers, including smallholder farmers, actually apply, they may have, they have a negative impact on the environment. We talk about reduced biodiversity. This one is very much important because if you reduce biodiversity, it means the superior genotypes that you can actually have that are not genetically modified are also reduced. So when you reduce biodiversity, you're also reducing the chances of having good varieties that everybody can actually use to plant. And currently we know how the seed system works in the country, in the continent. So farmers have to buy very expensive seeds, which are most of them genetically engineered, and they're also genetically engineered to lose viability over a certain period. So that means you need to go back to the market to buy the seeds again. And of course, it makes sense. It makes a business sense because those multinational companies that provide the seeds need to make profit. So every time when they introduce a variety, they'll make sure that you also go back to buy the new seeds. So, but if we can practice farming in a way that we distract our biodiversity, in a way that we deplete our biodiversity, we can end up not having seeds that can actually we can use on our own homes or in our own genetic breeding programs to produce new varieties that feeds our environment, which can eventually give us the high yield. And of course, other issues, they can involve deforestation, they can involve salinization, which comes with the heavily irrigated farming. But I know that 90% of our farming system is sort of like rain-fed farming rather than irrigated farming. So salinization might not be a major factor, but of course it cannot be ignored, and we cannot wait until it becomes a problem in South Africa, especially for our smallholder farmers. And the whole decline of the resources that we need, I'm talking about the biodiversity resources, then obviously will impact the patterns of our cultivations in terms of the genotypes that we use or our breeding programs from our side as researchers. Because I can tell you now, as a researcher who's trying to breed new cultivars that can actually withstand drought and other abiotic stresses, I can tell you that it is actually difficult to actually get the good germplasm, especially those that are endemic to Africa, that I can actually use to develop new varieties, especially knowing that they will be well adapted to our condition. Instead, our farmers, if we were able to do that, our farmers will be able to get our own seeds that we developed in the continent, and they don't have to buy from the multinational companies, which are mostly the Americans and European companies that provide the seeds. And of course, all of those above mentioned factors, they are exacerbated by the human activities. We talked about carbon emissions, the industries and everything, they all lead into that. And of course, this issue of agricultural expansion, which means you will have to clear more fields for agriculture, that also leads into deforestation and other issues. So everything linked together, and if you can look at it, you will actually realize that it's as a result of human impact. And of course, one of the most important things that I thought I should share also is that we'll see how this Agritech and biotechnology can actually assist in terms of assisting smallholder farmers in dealing with some of the problems that each and every farmer has to deal with, I mean, globally, whether it's diseases caused by bacteria, viruses, and fungi, etc., the insects, or the stress, the abiotic stress, like your chilling stress, as well as drought. We know that we are told in South Africa that we are now facing a looming El Nino. So then obviously that means the change in the monsoon patterns and of course reduced rainfall as a result. So, but we can use this agri-technology as well as the biotechnology in order to mitigate against such things. And of course, physiologically, these factors have a huge impact because they're the ones that are responsible for poor growth of your crops, and they're also responsible for the poor yield that you produce. And of course, if you have poor yield as a farmer, you know that you will have poor profit figures. So now, as I've indicated earlier, that farming is not mainly for profit, but also to ensure that we satisfy all the needs of our human population. We also have a safe and healthy environment, clean environment, especially in the sense that we should use this agri-technology as well as biotechnology to reduce some of the harmful environmental factors that we actually emit into the environment. And of course, when you do that, maximizing your yield or increasing your yield, you also have to have good economic returns. But all comes as a result of the use of the new technology that I'll discuss this, briefly discuss this. And of course, these are the goals, we all know them, and we all endeavor to try and make an impact regarding this. And as a researcher, I also try and find a way to see that my research actually could impact the society. I can actually work in the future with smallholder farmers in particular, so that I have programs that are actually, or projects that are actually linked to the farmers directly, since I'm also dealing with breeding. So now, in terms of the agri-tech that I want to talk about, there are just 2 minutes to summarize. 2 minutes to summarize. And fortunately, I was involved in the American Institute Foundation program that actually helped. It was a group of experts that helped to design the Agritech competition. There's a competition that is run by the Mozilla Foundation and Institute, American Institute. So what I've learned from that exercise was that Africa, it's like I've indicated, Africa, we're still far behind in terms of application technology. Only commercial farmers can have access to this technology, and I see Bayer also is actually doing very well in terms of trying to bring technology to the continent. But unfortunately, the cost of such technologies is just too much, and obviously, our smallholder farmers will actually struggle to meet this cost. But I want to emphasize that there are some low-cost technologies, and of course, ways that do not require money that we can actually implement that can actually benefit the smallholder farmers. And maybe you can see my point there. The first one is about precision agriculture. Okay, that I just put it there, but most of the applications there, they are just not a bit cheap. But of course, the benefit of this is that some of the mobile applications that I will indicate on point 4 actually use this digital cloud data to generate some of the apps that could actually benefit our smallholder farmers. Sometimes maybe if farmers can try and make use of the mobile app that you can just easily download from the Google app, and then you can actually be able to even try and efficiently or try to increase your productivity. And then also the issue of smart irrigation. Smart irrigation, I mean, these are systems that are interlinked or connected through your Internet of Things and or your apps that you can have them on your mobile phone, but that could actually help you control or determine how much of water you need to irrigate your crops with. Later, I'll show in one of the images, there's an app actually that can actually be downloaded, and you can use to actually determine how much of water you can actually use to irrigate your planting in order for you not to waste water, but also in order for you not to flood your crops, because there's also a challenge with water, like I'm talking about the looming El Nino. And of course, the sustainable agricultural management practices, like the simple ones where you think of the diversity, you think of crop rotation, the cover crops, or your biofertilizers where you use biostimulant and chemicals. Like I've indicated, these applications, there may be too many to cover, but I think these ones that I've summarized here are actually one of the low-cost methods that one can actually apply to actually try and increase efficiency in their agricultural productivity. And then the biotechnological solution that they also highlight. And the biotechnological solution actually
sorry, Dr. Mangena, 1 more minute and then we can round off your presentation. We can take one more quick, like you can expand during the discussion time. Sorry, yeah.
Okay, sorry. I forgot that I have 10 minutes. Sorry, yeah. But I wanted to indicate that these are the type of applications that you can. I know that smallholder farmers cannot have phones, but we can just have apps that you can download. They use the same technology as the ones that you have in the advanced technologies. And then also the use of greenhouses. These ones, there are low-cost greenhouses that one can actually design just to grow your crops. You can just buy your sheets depending on the percentage of your sunlight that you want, and then easily do that. And in terms of plant tissue culture, you need a good facility. But as I said, smallholder farmers are encouraged to work with researchers like myself to see if we can develop mutation breeding programs that will actually benefit them. And then lastly, these are some of the low-cost, non-monetary techniques that we can still apply, and in combination with the agri-tech that I've highlighted. And then in terms of regulations, I've seen that I actually wanted to talk about the genetic engineering, which is also a very much important technique that we can actually apply. And of course, most of the maize that we grow in the country is GMOs, but we still can see that the understanding in terms of how they work and how they're being developed and how they can actually benefit farmers, since some farmers are actually skeptical about them. But then since there's competition between organic farming and the production of GMOs as well, it's a debate that maybe I think education can actually clarify this, and we can actually try, all of us, to work together in order to increase yield. And of course, incentives are important, and obviously with the fact that we must work with the farmers on the ground, we must design programs that are actually linked to the smallholder farming systems. And yeah, that's basically what I had. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mangena. I will just hand over quickly to our last speaker for the day, Rirhandzu, to take us through her presentation, and then hopefully we'll have enough time to just pick up on the few questions that have already been posted in the chat and other questions that people may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just trying to get access to share my screen, if that is okay. Good evening, everyone. While I'm trying to get that, my name is Rirhandzu, and as you've heard, I'm from the Living Source Community Learning Farm. And I will be speaking more of around really the evolution of how we've built our network of stakeholders, and how that has really helped with kind of strengthening our farm and our project. May I?
Sorry to just, yeah. Dr. Mangena, would you please stop sharing your screen so Rirhandzu can also share her screen? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's try again. Oh goodness. Just give me a moment. I have a new device and I always struggle with sharing. Okay, here we go. Let's try. Oh, my word. Is it possible to share the presentation from your side?
Let me just try sharing from my side.
Apologies for this.
Just hold on.
So thank you for like the previous speakers. I feel that I don't need to touch on quite a lot of the things. I think they thoroughly touched on specifically on I think the needs of smallholder farmers, not only in South Africa, but across the country, but as well as, you know, the needs and advocacy for more of the sustainable agricultural management approaches of which we practice. And so it's really appreciated. And I like to see that there are quite a lot of connections in that regard. All right, thank you so much, Sheldon. Okay, so as I mentioned, I am from the Living Soils Community Learning Farm, or I'll be speaking more on the Living Soils Community Learning Farm project based at the Sustainability Institute in Stellenbosch, very close to Cape Town here in South Africa. You can move on to the next slide. And then so, yeah, I'm just really going to speak more on network building, or really kind of build a narrative of how that process has helped with how we really built up the project as Living Soils. And so move to the next slide. Yeah, I mean, we already know that we have an issue in terms of our very fragile food systems, and then we're seeing that be continually amplified by COVID-19 as well as the energy crisis. And I think we've highlighted through the previous speakers as well that there is a need for really supporting small-scale farmers, because they are critical in supporting a household food and nutritional security. And they really also play a big role in terms of livelihood building and employment creation. And then so there is that need to increasingly integrate our actions and to improve efficiency through that. Next slide. And then so just going to give a bit of a background and then just take you through the journey as Living Soils. So first and foremost, it's a partnership project between three unlikely or likely partners, first being Woolworths and the Woolworths Trust specifically, Spear Wine Farm at the Sustainability Institute. And we've been running since 2019, and we're based on Spear actually, which has been a really great partnership. They've provided us land where we can have a small-scale farm and we practice regenerative or sustainable farming methods of production on we have 3 hectares, but we're only farming on 1 hectare. And so part of the point and the reason for the creation of this farm was just to see how we can really contribute to food security and really reshaping local food, our local food systems within Stellenbosch. And then this is to really focus on quite a lot of the partner goals of addressing food security and livelihood security in many different forms, with the particular interest of supporting children and youth. Next slide. And then so with Living Soils, we have 3 main pillars of trying to see how we can contribute to our local food system, really speaking to that. And the first is transforming at-risk households into food secure families. And as I mentioned, with specific focus on children within the local community. Secondly, it's also contributing to more environmentally friendly methods. And so this is through practicing ecologically regenerative food production methods and really piloting and testing out different methodology to contribute to building that resiliency. And then lastly, being a platform for training and learning for emerging and young farmers, really to tackle food insecurity and I think the ever-growing youth unemployment that is occurring in South Africa. Next slide. And then, so how do we do that? So through our journey, we realized that there's this three main things that we need to have in place in order for us to address these three main pillars. And then, so first is the need for us to have a functioning regenerative farm, and then to, as far as possible, have our farm be operational. And part of that is to see how we can be self-sustaining. And this is now looking at how can us as a small scale farm meet quite a lot of these needs to be financially resilient, to also contribute to local food access and all of that. Secondly is that then we need to also ensure that we have a really good curriculum, and then making sure that we have a good holistic skills development element of the project as well. And then lastly, I feel that then this can't happen if we don't have a good network of support. And then this is now through stakeholder and stakeholder building, and then really building approach through collaboration and partnership. And then this is not only to support the project activities, because we have so many, but then it's also in shaping and building our knowledge, sharing our knowledge through advocacy, having access to resources and sharing our resources and opportunities, and be it within the partnership or from outside or external stakeholders. And this is not only to help with supporting the project, but then it is also to see how we are better embedded within our local community, so that we are able to be effective in addressing the needs that we feel are appropriate to us. And then so this speaks to this embedded model, where in the middle is really like that growth and learning opportunity, be it of our beneficiary learners, as it's students or otherwise, but then also internally as the team, we really appreciate and encourage like a growth mentality and mindset. And then so this happens through a regenerative environment that is the farm. But all of that can only happen if we have an understanding and really building and strengthening our network of support. Next slide. So how we started, when the project started, we were growing food to support mainly children and youth that attend different educational programs at the Sustainability Institute. And then so there were about 240 children at the time. Move on to the next slide. But we're not only growing food and contributing to the feeding program, we realized that there was also a need for capacity development. Next slide, please. And then so in the way that we make sure that there is an engagement with food is that the children and the youth not only eat our food, but then they also have to learn about our food and a very much hands-on experience. And then so from seed to plate, we do have a very experiential program that the children are embedded in on a daily basis. Next slide. But then came the impact of COVID-19, where the school programs closed down, and then we needed to pivot because we still had the primary objective of addressing food security. And then so it was through the help of one of the external stakeholders, which were what's called the Lyndoch Valley Collaborative, as well as the SCAN, which is the Stellenbosch Civil Advocacy Network, who were trying to see how to connect food to food insecure households. And through this, we were able to build a network of people who are able to help with logistics in distributing food to the households. And then we were able to identify about 400 households. And then within, I think, close to a year, we were contributing food on a weekly basis to these households. And then we were not the only ones. We had other growers, but then we also had other food security organizations who already had the means to get to the households who were able to provide the food relief. I think, yes, sorry, with that, we also realized a number of things. I think as we were starting with, as COVID was coming in, we also started with a program of supporting young emerging farmers. And so this is when we are also piloting a program to see how we can firstly capacitate young people in farming, but then secondly also through a curriculum of sustainable agriculture. Next slide. But then we realized through COVID that there was quite a lot of different facets of how we can approach this. And so again, through SCAN, we realized that there were also quite a lot of farmer communities where youth, unemployed youth existed. And so we also wanted to create a program that also didn't leave any, high school dropouts or youth that are dependent on their families out. And then so we also created a youth in transition internship that not only provides skills, but then it was also to just kind of embed them in reclaiming, heritage foods and then their historic and indigenous food systems. Next slide. And then through this process, we also realized that it's really great to pilot different things, but then we also needed to focus. And then so as we were trying to figure out how best to support young farmers, we also started getting interest from different agricultural colleges. So we were intentional in working with them and in understanding what needed to, how we would be able to support them. And then so we also created a student farmer internship that supports their work integrated learning. And then so that's really helped with meeting some of the gaps. And next slide. And then as I mentioned, we have to be a functional farm. So one of the things was that also as we're building all these relationships to support our capacity development and food security, how do we also ensure that we build our financial resiliency? And then so we also connected with different farmer networks and agri-hubs. And then that was to just enable us with knowledge sharing and resource access, as well as market access. So the Philippi Agri-Hub, which unfortunately closed down, was a big proponent to this. But then what has happened is that through quite a lot of self-organization of small farmers, other agri-hubs have come to light. And then so we've already pivoted to building another agri-hub that helps with market access for quite a lot of the small scale farmers. And then on top of that, we also part of like different sustainable agriculture groups that help us with moving towards building towards sustainable practices, but then also improving in our quality as well as management and certifications. So PGS South Africa, particularly PGS Western Cape, have been really great in creating that knowledge sharing and building. Next slide. And then what is nice as well is that also looking back within our main partnerships, for example, with Woolworths, they have their own internal training and support for their farmers. And then so that's also been really great to benefit from within the project. With internal learning capacity development of particularly our core team of farmers that are the ones in charge of our farming operations. But then that translates into mentorship for quite a lot of the young and youth interns that we have on the farm. Next slide. And then so what I was just trying to paint is a picture of showing that we're still growing. It's only been 4 years going on 5. Of trying to figure out how best to position ourselves, but then because of the connection and our collaborations with different partners, we've been able to gain access in terms of improving our reach in food security, and also understanding how best to support capacity development for youth in providing them access and opportunities within the agricultural sector. And I think lastly, also improving in our sustainable farming practices as well. And then with that, we created our principle of shared values. And so these are really very much in terms of how we approach stakeholder engagement, and also a process of building the project is always through inclusion and co-creation. Always understanding that we're context embedded, so our solution might not necessarily be the best for another part, another farm in another part of the country or the continent, but there's quite a lot of learning from that. And then we value partnership and collaboration. And it's always process orientated. It's never about the end goal, but it is always about what we learn from the process. And it's always also opportunities driven. We know that there's quite a lot of challenges, but what opportunities are out there to build from to start addressing those challenges. And on the last slide, yeah, so basically our learning is that we're continuously building our community of stakeholders, and we've been able to learn quite immensely and improve and meaningfully contribute to building our resilient food system within our local community. But then we've also had reach beyond this, because there's quite a lot of learning as well as opportunities to learn from other networks to help with building living soils. So yeah, with that, thank you. We'll just try to be as fast as possible given our time constraints.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rirhandzu. Time flies when we're having fun, right? So I think just to allow our participants to also share their views, ask questions, maybe we can just extend our time with another 10 minutes or so, so that people can be able to converse, because this is a discussion, right? Thank you very much to all our presenters for the wonderful presentations. Personally, I have a lot of questions, but I think one thing that I'm going to ask, Boyite has already done that. He has dropped the link to our SI Cape Town Hub platform. We can always take the remaining conversations there and chat and continue the conversation, because clearly we can see that 1 hour is not enough. So, okay, I'm going to pick up some questions that I saw in the chat. I think some of them have been answered, but I'm just going to go back. Jill, there was a question for you. Boyite was curious about if there are subsidies or governmental bodies that would possibly support these smallholder farms to scale their growth, along with how best practices are shared to close the knowledge gap between them. And if anybody else has a question, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll be able to pick on.
Yeah, maybe just related to that. So I think that at least in West Africa, there is a lot of incubator programs that are promoting such an approach, but they are mainly, I think, funded by international donors or aid projects. And regarding the action of the different government bodies, there is two kinds of intervention. I think there is one kind of intervention we try to promote like agribusiness or located agribusiness, and there is other kind of information that are trying to mainly support a really small farmers or small scale producer. And this is really two different visions about what we should do to support the production side, which is yes, supporting the development of agribusiness, or mainly supporting the different really small stakeholders. I'm not sure if it answered to your question. And I also saw that there were another question on the chat related to the action of the ECOWAS to promote export trade. So I'm not working on export trade, as I'm working on food and nutrition security. So we are mainly working on intra-regional trade. And I put a few elements on the chat. There is already a common tariff that apply for all West African food products that are traded in the region. And now the ECOWAS is launching a big project on reducing the different non-tariff barriers too. So this means like reducing the procedures at the border, reducing issues related to harassment at border frontiers, and a lot of and we are working with them on this project. So it's a big project, big topic too.
Thank you so much, Jill, and for picking up the other question that was directed to you. And Julia asked a question, and say us around are there any other examples of innovative financing models, either in South Africa or West Africa for small-scale farmers? Rirhandzu and Dr. Mangena, you can also answer on that if you have responses to that.
Okay, I can try and answer the question, and maybe also combine it with the question on stakeholders, because they are more or less the same. But in terms of financing models, I've seen that DSI is doing a very good job working with organizations like Eureka as an international organization. I think it seems like a bilateral form of arrangement where they can actually provide funding. And this also goes for people who want to have access to the technology. There are a lot of non-governmental organizations, like I've earlier spoken about the Milken Institute partnering with the Motsepe Foundation. They all try to provide funding for all these good ideas, not only in terms of innovation, but in terms of having access to this technology, because there's a great need of this technology. So access mostly for smallholder farmers is limited by the capital, the funding issue. So that is why I emphasized earlier that we must partner with the smallholder farmers when we do our project, because through our projects, we can also access different funding instruments. And therefore, we can, meanwhile, innovate while we are supporting them to actually have access to the technology. And I think the DSI, as I've mentioned, they have a lot of instruments that actually smallholder farmers can access. And like the example of Eureka is a good one, because you don't need to partner with anyone. You can just go there as a smallholder farmer with your business plan and everything, then you can even get funding from that. So, but obviously now with the importance of collaboration, I think we just have to also get ourselves on the ground, because most of the time our research ends in the lab, but we don't interact with the smallholder farmers, and then we can then try and make use of all these available opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Thanks,
Mangena. Oh, okay.
May I add to that?
Sure.
I think, yeah, just coming from the experience of being on the ground this time around, is that these are innovations that are made with small scale farmers in mind, and I can speak to two kind of current initiatives that may be speaking to innovative finance. I think the one, and I'm not sure who's holding this project, but then it's really linking farmers to carbon credits. And so this is the encouragement of small scale farmers to really develop and improve in terms of their sustainable agriculture, and then linking that to having access to carbon credits as a means of finance. And then I don't know how blockchain works, but I know quite a lot of projects are piloting, blockchain technology to enable that. The second one is it's a project by a friend and innovator who was looking at how to best kind of capacitate and enable farmers through bringing in very simple technology. And so the name of the initiative is called Footprint. And then so a lot of the challenges with small scale farmers is that they don't necessarily have the capacity to learn or use complicated or long platforms, and so they're using a simple WhatsApp chatbot that really helps with farmers to communicate. And then I think part of it is to enable farmers to basically meet quite a lot of market requirements. In terms of reporting, their harvesting, tracking information around their inputs and all of that, so that they can actually have historical data that speak to the requirements, for example, for their food safety, so that enables them to have better market access capability. And so they're doing quite a lot with engaging small scale farmers through like a simple approach of using WhatsApp, which is already a very a highly used platform where a lot of farmers, at least in my experience, use in communicating, for example, their market availabilities, sharing resources and information. And then so how can you pivot to use that to and use the information that exists on those platforms to not only gain access to information, but then also ensure that you have information in such a way that is tangible for opportunities to access to market and finance. So those are the two areas that I can think of.
Thank you very much, Rirhandzu. When you talk about blockchain, I'm sure that's quite innovative. If farmers are able to actually access that and improve, on the access to finance for their activities. We are over again by another minute, but there are lots of connections here. I'm just going to go through again a few things that came through from from the three presentations. Jill, you spoke about value chain development and the challenges that smallholder farmers are facing in West Africa related to ecosystem building. And Dr. Mangena, you also answered the question around the stakeholders that are needed to play an important role in promoting agri-tech and biotechnology for smallholder farmers. Rirhandzu, you spoke about holistic skills development, which is very, very crucial. I think while farmers must be able to understand how to plant and what happens with the seasons, what the types of soil and the fertility of the soil, the types of seeds to actually use and all of that, it is also important to ensure that they do have business and marketing skills in order to actually make profit from their businesses. And also promotion of secular models. I think you touched a little bit on that. It's something that we can actually pick up in our platform and talk more about it. And then the creation of shared values among stakeholders, which is the very reason why we are having this particular event around ecosystem building for agricultural innovation. So for stakeholders to actually achieve a shared value, the shared value must actually be created. And how do we get there? I think that's a question that I was going to ask you, but now we have really, really run out of time. I'm going to hand over to Sheldon so that he can tell us about the next steps before we go. Thank you.
All right, thank you there, Linda, for that rundown of what we experienced today. We're really in some great company for this session and the entire series at large. I can't believe we're actually at the end of this learning series, because it was just yesterday that we were sort of planning the series itself. But yeah, here we are. So I would like to thank everybody that formed part of this series, that joined us from the beginning, and for those that also joined along the three sessions. We would have liked to get some feedback. I do not want to keep you any longer. Rirhandzu's already sitting in the dark, so we take cognizance of that. But we would like you to please join our community, right? We would be planning more of this kind of stuff and conversations that are very important to society and our communities and the continent. Please look out for our Twitter pages, YouTube channel, where you can find the entire series already available for view, and our LinkedIn page under the SI Cape Town Hub. So if there are no other further burning questions, thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you and talk to you very soon. All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you all for your
everybody.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the
Thank you. Bye.
opportunity. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.